So Matthew Livelsberger had asserted that there was war crimes that was committed in the Nimruz Province in Afghanistan in 2019. And I looked into it, and there was a war crime. There was a major war crime. Now, apparently, the U.S. government had said that this was the first time that they had seen massive civilian casualties when it came to these drug lab bombings. So the Trump administration, and I'm not for sure if the other administrations had come to the same conclusion, but they're bombing a whole bunch of poppy fields, right? They were bombing opium and poppy fields because they were saying that's how the Taliban got their money. They got their money through not just heroin, but also morphine. And then we were told that now they're into meth. So they were making all these different drugs, heroin, morphine, and meth. So this is in a region bordering near Helmand. Remember, Helmand Province was a province that was too tough to conquer. We could conquer the rest of Afghanistan, but not Helmand. And then every new commander that kept coming in said, well, let's go into Helmand. No, we got to go into the Helmand Province. So here's some of the details. The reason why I mention this, Matthew Allen Livelsberger had addressed his manifesto to dear fellow service members and veterans and citizens. So the American people was the last person he was addressing all this information to. He said, dear fellow service members. So this was to the troops and to the veterans. So to the current troops and the former troops. So on May 5th, 2019, in Farah and Nimruz, this was in the Backwad district. On May 5th, 2019, there was a bunch of airstrikes that were conducted in a 2-hour period from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And they said the propaganda was we were attacking the Taliban meth labs. But then hundreds of civilians are going to get killed. And why is that? Because these heroin, morphine, and maybe meth labs, these drug labs that they said were financing the Taliban, were actually a bunch of mom and pop businesses. They're poor. They got to, make some money somehow. And then I also heard that Operation Iron Tempest, that even though it was negligible. It was negligible what they were doing because some of these drug labs were improvised mud huts, which could be immediately reconstructed. So let's go back to the district or the details of May 5th, 2019. So the United Nations had reported and verified that 30 civilians were killed, including 14 children and 5 women. Well, the U.S. government just kept saying, nuh-uh, we have precise weapons, we got precise missiles, nuh-uh. What do you mean civilians were killed? Basically, the lives that the U.S. government were telling were over the fucking top. They were over the top. And then they were saying, well, they were part of the Taliban. They were giving the money, to the Taliban. Neither one of those things were correct. Now, they found some tenuous connections, but we were supposed to believe that the Taliban had been establishing all these meth labs and these heroin or morphine labs. There's a whole population in Afghanistan. And then later on, the only thing that seems believable to me, they said that they were getting taxes. They were getting taxes from these people. Well, how are they getting taxes from the people? When they go to the store and buy some bread, then they were saying that they provided security for the transportation. Well, in some respects, if you have a police force, in America, and then the meth person is, making meth and then going to the people and selling the meth, is that the police that's providing security for the transportation? That's the only thing that has any plausibility to actually being the truth. And so this is a massive cover-up. This was a massive cover-up. Matthew Allen Livelsberger said that he was involved in the targeting of these drug labs. And since he had known this information, he felt that's why the Homeland Security or FBI or somebody was following him. So the United Nations did report that 30 civilians were killed, and they verified that. But that was severely underestimated. A different estimate was between 40 to 200 killed. Now that Matthew Allen Livelsberger had said that hundreds of civilians were killed, Well, 200 is hundreds of civilians. And so when it comes to who the Taliban, here's one story. One story was at the father's house. He saw the bombing was happening near his area, near his neighborhood. He tried to get his family out. 3 boys were still left in his house. So they didn't just bomb the drug labs, but they also bombed structures that was around the drug labs. Matthew Allen Livelsberger said he had identified 125 targets, and 65 or 70 were bombed, were attacked. So the numbers that seem the most believable, I would say hundreds have killed, 200 were killed, 200 civilians, including 80 children and 9 women. Now this happened in 2019. This happened 5 years ago. And then when I think about all the people that died in Iraq, all the people dying in Afghanistan, all the people dying in Palestine, well, let's just be honest. The American people don't really seem to give 2 squirts of frog shit. The American people don't seem to give a damn that brown people are being blown up. 80 kids, 9 women. And so what ultimately had happened was these drug labs are mom and pop businesses. They are just mom and pop businesses. They are independent proprietors. And so when the United States had done these airstrikes against these drug labs, they said this was the first time that there was mass civilian casualties. Well, they specifically blew up those houses because they thought that they were, into drugs, heroin, morphine, or meth. So it's a poor country. I think that they were doing, whatever they needed to do in order to make a buck. How connected they were to the Taliban, they said none of them. The leader, the governor of the Bakwa district said none of them were connected to the Taliban. The Taliban didn't say anything at all. They said something. They said that none of the people that were bombed was Taliban. None of the people that were bombed were Taliban. When I compared the civilians that were killed compared to the Taliban, the civilians that the Taliban had killed in ISIS, well, the Taliban and ISIS had killed 531 civilians in the first half of 2019. How many did Americans kill? Well, 3,812. And of course, these are, verified. And U.S. FORA, well, that's precision strikes. Yet the U.S. forces in Afghanistan, they use precision strikes, right? They killed 150 Talibans. No, they were a bunch of Talibans who were making meth to give money to the Taliban. So when you compare and contrast how many civilians were killed in the first half of 2019, Taliban and ISIS had killed 531, and the American government, the American forces, U.S. FORA, had killed nearly 4,000. They killed nearly 4,000 civilians. That's just in 2019. So I think that it was actually a good thing that we pulled out of Afghanistan. It reminds me of when Haiti was occupied. The good thing about it was, okay, even if you try to say that the United States tried to do something good in Afghanistan, maybe we did, maybe we didn't. By pulling out, we're actually making good on the promise that we did not just go there to conquer them and to take over their land and to take over their people and to take over their resources. By withdrawing, we are kind of making good on the claim that we were there to, defend people, win hearts and minds, to protect and serve. So they had targeted civilian structures in addition to the structures that they said were drug labs. How, certain were they drug labs? Where did they get this so-called intelligence from? And then when they said that, 200 were killed and maybe dozens more. Dozens. So 24, 36. And then how much did this cost the American people? Because they were, claiming that they were attacking the drug labs that was giving money for the Taliban. Well, we were spending $1.5 million a day to attack those opium poppy fields and that was Operation Iron Tempest. It cost $1.5 million a day. And then, of course, it breaks, I think, Article 3, Geneva Conventions. It breaks a lot of things. If you're attacking civilians, that's terrorism. To attack civilians for a political reason, that is terrorism. So the war on terror, I think, has been over for quite some time. It's not a war on terror anymore. It's just the war against the world. It's just U.S. hegemony, U.S. empire. And it's the thing with the Romans is that they overextended themselves. The Romans also, if they conquered a new province, they would make the conquered people citizens of the Roman Empire. So they were doing empire a little bit better than what we're doing. It doesn't seem like, I don't know what the hell we're doing. We got 1,000 military bases all over the world. And we're just supposed to believe that, good things are happening. Good things are happening with this. People are resentful. People get pissed off. You've been sitting there, striking their people. You killed 4,000 civilians. And then the Taliban, had killed 531. So basically, if you're a citizen or a civilian in Afghanistan, you got to look over your shoulder for U.S. missile strikes. You got to look over your shoulder for Taliban. You got to look over your shoulder for everybody. And then if you're trying to make money and you get into the drug trade because there's money to be made with heroin and morphine and meth. With America, there's a war on drugs. We don't give any U.S. aid if the country hasn't declared themselves a war on drugs. But the number one purchaser of the drugs of the world is the United States of America. So the U.S. has an insatiable appetite. They have an insatiable appetite for drugs. So there's a hypocritical policy that's going on right there. Also, we're supposed to be a free country. Don't we have a right to our own bodies? And then this is also business. It's business and farming, right? They got poppy fields. They're turning their poppy fields. Bolivia, they, have cocaine fields and they're their own nation. And so they're just allowed to, it's part of their culture, right? They go out, they chew on the cocoa leaves, and then they go ahead and make a bunch of cocaine. I remember when Donald was first elected into office, or the very first speech when he declared his presidency back in 2016, he said that the people that are coming over the border, they're bringing drugs and crime, and he's sure that some of them are good people. So when people are listing, a list of shit that, well, here's why we don't want these people. They're bringing crime, and they're bringing disease, and they're bringing drugs. Yeah, drugs are bad, MK. Drugs are bad. There's drugstores all over America. There's pharmacies all over America. There's still prescription pills for, Percocets and all these opium-based. Where's all this opium-based pills? Where are they getting their heroin and morphine, materials? Are they just making it in labs around the United States? So I think I've touched on all the, specific details. He said that the American people, this is Matthew Allen Livelsberger, he said that the American people are the best people ever, but that we're terminally ill. We are terminally ill, and we're on the verge of collapse. And so it would make no sense if you lived in a big skyscraper and the foundation started getting weaker and weaker, and then it's like moving, then it's like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. If you're living up on the top towers and you don't move out of that damn building, eventually that skyscraper is going to fall down. So either you got to just let it fall and then rebuild out of the rubble, or you could try to fix the Leaning Tower piece, try to, put it up right, try to get some foundation, try to support the foundation, try to get some reinforcements on the foundation. So this was a major incident. He said he was a part of it. He says that he's cleansed himself for the brothers that he lost and for the kids that he had killed. Matthew Allen Livelsberger says he's got all that he needs, and he's basically a symptom of the disease. He says even though he's got all that he needs, he still wants more and more and more. And so in a way, there's just so much, there's so much to this Matthew Allen Livelsberger story. He pointed out two things about the drone strikes, and then what were the Homeland Security and the FBI, were they stalking him? Were they following him? And I would like to know from either Homeland or FBI or the ATF or whoever the hell was following him. Why were they following him? Why were they following him? Why did he feel like they were following him? Was there some sort of operation? Was there some sort of file that was on this guy? And what was the reason? What was the reason that there was a file? He's a decorated U.S. He was a Green Beret. He was a Green Beret at the time that he blew up that Cybertruck right outside of the Trump Hotel. So it is a war crime because it was non-combatants. It was civilians. That's war crimes according to, Geneva, even to our own definitions of what terrorism is. It's war crimes. So RIP to the 200 people that were killed on May 5th, 2019 in the Farah Nimruz region in the province in the Backwal district. According to that governor, 45 were verified killed. So the United Nations, apparently you have to point to the body or some shit. I heard that the Russians, they were sitting there picking up the bodies afterwards, so that way you go into a city and you could just demolish the city, and if you pick up all the bodies and destroy the bodies, then anybody, international observers, UN or whoever, America, China, if anybody comes in after Russia goes into a city and they don't find, thousands of bodies, then they can't say that's how many people were killed. You can only verify the kills of the bodies that were still there. So, this shit's getting fucking disgusting and disturbing. And so thank God we pulled out of Afghanistan. Now we could just say, let, the Afghanistan people, govern themselves. But why couldn't we have just allowed the Taliban to keep the Helmand province, and then we could have kept all the regions around there? Did we give them the Constitution? Did we give them democracy? Did we give them rights and freedoms? Because you have a right to everything unless the civil society is actually going to protect, kind of the small civil liberties, the right to petition, the right to peacefully assemble, the right to speak, the right to the press, and the freedom to religion. So if you could protect those First Amendment freedoms, then people have to get rid of their right to everything. And so they got to buy into the society. They got to buy into the Constitution. They got to buy into the civil liberties. Did we do that? Did we try to do that? Are we doing that in Iraq? Are we doing that, in all the military bases all around the world? I think we should actually take the military bases and make them embassies and start treating the rest of the world as equals. And if there's some belligerent nations, and keep an eye on them and keep pressed up against them and make sure that they don't take any more, territory. The lines on the map, I think if we back away from Ukraine, then the lines on the map of the entire nations, even America might. They're fudging the lines of Ukraine, so they're going to start fudging the lines everywhere. You're going to have Germany pressing up against Poland. You're going to have Italy pressing up against Switzerland. You're going to have the African nations, South Africa, Asian nations, Azerbaijan. That's been fucking, there's something going on in Azerbaijan. And if we're going to be the world premier empire, then I think we should get people focused on this stuff. And then you should have, yearly reports, if not monthly reports, saying, what have you done? You're in Niger, okay, what have you done? You're in Cameroon, what have you done? What have you done? There's a 40-year dictator in Cameroon. So we know their elections are bullshit, and the 40-year dictator, that doesn't reflect American values whatsoever. Do they believe in the rule of law? Do they have federalism? Do they have bicameralism? What is their Bill of Rights? How many freedoms do the people of Cameroon have? In Cameroon, you got an Anglophone region and the Franc region too.